Welcome to the Fantasy Football Fellowship Podcast. I'm Bryce Johnson, fired up to be here today. A couple technical difficulties, and we are rocking and rolling. We're here to unpack fantasy, faith, and life. Trip Smith is back. Thankfully, his family is healthy. Tough week last week, but he is good to go, and we are here as your fantasy coaches, here to encourage you and help you win while you play fantasy football with purpose. As we provide fantasy advice, we won't always be right, but we hope we'll be convincing. We are coming to you live from the Unpacking It Ministry studio in downtown Mount Holly, just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And we've got a great show in store. We are going to do, I think, our first in-season Would You Rather segment. So we'll take a look at a couple different scenarios, a couple players, who do we pick moving forward. And then we'll do some bandwagon riding. I think some interesting players. Are we jumping on? Are we jumping off? We always love tackling the waiver wire. And this week, we've got a strong who is that? There is a wide receiver in Dallas. We are still asking that question. Who is that? So we will talk about that. Major injuries, plenty of shenanigans to get to. And how about I'm repping my Panthers today. How about the RB1 of the week, Rico Dowdle? Will that happen again? We will ask Trip that in just a moment. But I do want to begin this show on just some disappointing news that we received last week. And here at Fantasy Football Fellowship, we are thrilled with the leagues that are participating in Fantasy Football Fellowship and the camaraderie that is being experienced, the fellowship that's being experienced around the country, and the fruit we're hearing about, the excitement we're hearing. It's fantastic. One of those churches has been meeting and having a great time through the first few weeks of the season. And sadly, a Sunday ago, one of the leaders they have two leagues there. This is the First Baptist Church just outside of Canton, Ohio, about 5 miles from the Pro Football Hall of Fame. 61-year-old guy named John passed away. Very sad, very sudden, and he was sitting there watching football with his family, and so it passed away. And from what we heard, thankfully David, the pastor at the church, reached out to let us know about this news, and so we just encourage our Fantasy Football Fellowship community to pray for this family, to pray for the church. Trip and I are actually going to be reaching out after the show in our own unique way, but at least wanted to mention this to everybody as well. And so, so lift up John's family and the church, First Baptist Church, just outside of Canton, in a town called Massillon. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but so anyway, I hate to start the show on a negative note, but this is why these leagues are so important, because when tragedy hits, you got to have people in your corner, in your huddle. And so this league, couple leagues up there, they're, reeling from this, and they're looking around going, uh-oh, how did this happen? And so, our hope and prayer is that they continue to meet and they continue to rally around one another and seek God and turn to God and find comfort and peace during this time where, man, they lost their leader, John. And so that's really, really hard, really sad. But John knew the Lord and was serving the Lord in amazing ways at the church and left a great impact. And so wanted that to be somewhat of an encouragement, but also the reality of life, the reality of the trials and the pain that we go through. But let's do it together. The need for fantasy leagues, the need for fellowship. And so I know John wants those guys to keep going, right? And to be able to be there for each other. So we are here for each other as well. This is a larger community of fantasy football managers that participate in Fantasy Football Fellowship. And so we love being the coaches, being here on the microphone, but we're all in this together, trying to win in fantasy, of course, but trying to continue on this journey of following Jesus and growing in our faith. And so we will do that today. Today we're talking, our breakout topic is decision-making. All about decision-making. How is your decision-making? How has your decision-making been so far in fantasy football? How is it in life? As you look at sort of the course of your life, how have the decisions led you to this point, and what decisions do you need to make moving forward? What decisions are you facing today? We'll get into that in just a little bit. And of course, we'll talk fantasy along the way. But let's check in on Trip. Trip, how are you? Good to have you back in studio.
It's good to be back. Yeah, I missed you last week, Bryce. Me and my family. Fortunately, I dodged this, but my family, we went on what you might call a gastrointestinal journey that was not for the faint of heart last week. So I had to make the difficult decision not to be here to support my wife and little boys who were struggling. But I missed you. I love doing this with you every week. I had a fun and unusual week in fantasy football that I'm excited to talk about. But man, we had some high scoring players. And I texted you, on Sunday. It's like when this happens to me about once a season, where you're in one of these leagues where the average score for a winner on a weekly basis is 130 points, something like that. And then you have one of those weeks where you just go off for like 200 points. And it makes fantasy fun. Even when your team is not that great, it makes it feel like fantasy is worth playing. I had never had the experience before of being on the giving end of one of those 200 point kind of smackdowns and the receiving end in another league where one of the guys in our Unpacking It, our fantasy football fellowship league, that we do here, went off for like 210 points. Wow. It was Chris. I was playing Chris this week. He absolutely walloped me. And so I was thankful I had another team where I did the walloping. But it was a fun weekend of fantasy football. Lots of high scoring players this weekend.
Kind of cancels out. And a lot of surprising high scoring players, right. Yeah. And a lot of tight ends. This was sort of the week of the tight ends, which was interesting. So with that said, here we go. Fantasy Shenanigans.
Fantasy Shenanigans.
All right, so let's talk about some of the surprises, some of the interesting things that happened, the wild things that happened this past weekend, and what are the ramifications moving forward. And so the top running back this week, who would have thought, would be Rico Dowdle for the Panthers. They win the game, and now the question becomes, what does this mean for Chuba Hubbard? How much, if he is available in your league, do you spend all your remaining FOB to get him? What are your expectations for him moving forward, and how surprised were you with his performance?
Well, surprised, but I think I've always been a Rico Dowdle believer. I thought even a couple years ago when it was suggested that he was going to get a shot at that starting role in Dallas, and it seemed like even the Cowboys didn't really believe in him or want him to have that role. I thought this is a guy that's worth having on a fantasy roster, and he had some great games for us last season. He was like a running back that you could slot in during bye weeks. And so when I heard that Chuba Hubbard wasn't playing, I had him on my bench in a couple of leagues, mostly deeper formats, and went out and picked him up in another league. And there were a few places where I was forced to start him, just super shallow at running back for injury reasons or bye week reasons. There were some good running backs on bye this week. I think, unfortunately, what it means long-term for Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle is that those guys are just going to continue to share volume. When they're both healthy, when they're both active, this was already happening before Hubbard got hurt. Yep. Dowdle was getting more and more touches during the game. And I think you could see like a real two-headed monster where either one of them being a sort of a viable fantasy start for you is going to depend on who gets the touchdown that week. So good news it's a good problem for the Panthers to have, because on a team that's sort of lacking for offensive excitement and dynamism, I think they have two running backs that are pretty solid. But Dowdle's a guy that when Hubbard is out, I'm happy to start him as like a running back 3 type player. The
question for me is, how many times do the Panthers get to play the Dolphins the rest of the season? Are they on the schedule a few more times?
I mean, the Dolphins defense is terrible. It's also, the Panthers play well at home.
We're not known to have a great home crowd here, so it's very interesting.
I think the keep pounding crowd is pretty fun, and they've been through so much misery in the last however many years now that they're the fact that we're 2-0 at home, I think the fans are going to keep showing up and keep getting loud until later in the season when we realize this is just a defunct team. I heard somebody compare Bryce Young to a boxer who has to taste his own blood before he really starts fighting. It's like inevitably we spot every team that we play like this 14 or 21 point lead. And then it's like, Bryce is like, oh yeah, I do know how to play quarterback. I do have Tet McMillan on my team. We have players that our offense can look good. And Dowdle was the guy this week. So yeah, it was exciting to start him in a couple of leagues that I was in, but I just don't know what you can take from it going forward.
No, I think
the Dolphins
are going
really
to be
bad.
A split.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a split, and I think it ends up hurting Chuba a little bit more. And so they'll both probably be more so in the flex spot moving forward. But as injuries continue to hit the running back position, there will be weeks, especially with bye weeks, that you do need these guys to be RB2s for you. And so I think Dowdle and Chuba, when healthy, can potentially be that for you, depending on the matchup. All right, some other shenanigans. Speaking of the running back position in Arizona, I mean, this has been the wildest team this year. And the scene on Sunday, I mean, I had it on. I followed along fairly closely at the end of that game where the Titans came back to win it. But going into this game, so going into the season, I was in on Trey Benson. I was waiting for the James Conner injury. James Conner goes down early. Not that we celebrate injuries, but we celebrate when our players get an opportunity to play. So Benson comes in. Then Benson goes down. And then going into this game, it was like, well, there might be a chance for Michael Carter to be the guy. And it's like, wait, Michael Carter's still in the league? What, the fourth string running back is just going to come in and be the guy? And sure enough, he was. He had 73 yards, a touchdown, 5 receptions. And so I just avoided the Cardinals at this point. And then Amari DiMercato also had a pretty nice game and would have scored a touchdown, but he dropped the ball at the goal line. And so it cost him and Fantasy Manager 6 points. So that was absolutely shenanigans of the day. And I read an article before the show on Sports Illustrated about a psychologist who's an expert in brain farts. And let that set in. That's his job. And that situation for DiMercato, he had a brain fart. How about that? So we're yelling at him for how could you do this? But there is some psychology in there. So anyway, go read the article. It's interesting. Maybe it'll help you as a fantasy manager, but it'll give you a little more grace for DiMercato. But the shenanigans moving forward for Arizona, I'm not real encouraged by them. I don't really want them in my lineup. I want to avoid the Cardinals. The fact they lost that game is crazy. Which then on the flip side, the Titans and also a couple other teams, this was a week of comebacks. Teams were coming, the Panthers too. Teams were coming back late in games. And what happens late in games? Fantasy garbage time. Fantasy, like you're throwing the ball, you're getting big plays. And so a number of teams, the Titans and, I mean, gosh, even Jacksonville scoring late Monday night.
The
Bengals, absolutely. T. Higgins got in there late. So Jamar Chase ended up finishing with a good day, even though early on it was not great. The Broncos came back against the Eagles. So anyway, of all those players at the end, did any of them help you or any that we have to be cautious because it was more garbage time scoring versus sustainable scoring?
Obviously, the way the Titans won that game is ridiculous. One of the wildest endings to a football game ever. That said,
and Tyler Lockett's still in the league.
Yeah, that said, Cam Ward is one of these, he's one of these first pick quarterbacks who's in an incredibly difficult situation where not a lot has happened this season thus far to boost his confidence. And I really do think the mental space for a quarterback, the confidence thing, especially for these young quarterbacks. I mean, we see this with guys like Baker Mayfield, with guys like Sam Darnold, where they're just in terrible situations where their confidence as a quarterback is absolutely shot. So I guess the one thing that I would hope is that just maybe the fourth quarter that Cam Ward had where he looked a little bit more serviceable and dynamic could be the start of a confidence building process for him. Now, I'm not pushing all of my chips in on that possibility because I still think there's a lot to be worried about there. But I do think they said going into this game, we want to get Calvin Ridley the ball more. They said after this game, we want to continue to get Calvin Ridley the ball more. And he was
questionable going in.
A
lot of people benched him, even dropped him.
Right.
I started
he was
him,
on
thankfully.
Most people's benches. Yeah. And unless you had a real need because of a bye week, I think he was on most people's benches. I'm wondering, could this be the time to get out on Calvin Ridley? I mean, if I could trade him for 75 cents on the dollar, or what I drafted him, I think that I would do that. This was not a legitimate win for the Titans. It was a terrible loss for the Cardinals. And speaking when we're talking about Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, I mean, the big news that we just got kind of right before this episode or earlier this morning was that the Bengals traded for Joe Flacco. They acquired Joe Flacco. So they've Browning has done everything that he needed to do to lose their confidence. He has looked really, really bad. It probably is good news, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, that Joe Flacco looks like he'll be the starting quarterback there soon. It's not great news. So don't mistake the good news for great news. I do think that Flacco at this point is an upgrade for what Browning has been for these last few weeks. But Jamar Chase coming off of this big 30-point performance, Did you hear the amazing stat that Jamar Chase was the leading tackler for the Bengals until the fourth quarter of the game?
Yikes.
He had 3 tackles in this game.
After interceptions.
Right, yeah. So that tells you everything that you need to know about their situation. And I don't think Flacco is going to turn things around in a major way. I wish they would have gone after somebody like Jameis Winston, I don't know, Trey Lance, Anthony Richardson, somebody that makes you excited. Joe Flacco is just not an exciting acquisition.
You're still on the Anthony Richardson. You're still holding out hope.
Don't get me wrong.
That's your guy. That's your guy.
No, don't get me wrong. I think that Anthony Richardson, I was wrong about him coming into the season. I think that we have seen now what the Colts could be with a good quarterback.
Wow.
But you've got to do something to drum up some excitement in your fan base. And maybe Anthony Richardson just slings it down the field for 80 yards for T. Higgins or Jamar Chase once a game. And there's at least a play that your fans can be excited about,
But Flacco can do that.
That's true.
But he didn't look very good in Cleveland. So that's the problem. This
really
year,
bad.
This year was not
terrible
great.
in Cleveland, but maybe that was more a symptom of the players around him. And maybe he'll do something with Chase and Higgins. I think that if I could take Chase coming off of this 30 performance and trade Jamar Chase for a player like Drake London, who is now past his bye week, I'm not sure. I haven't gone through the rankings to see exactly how low that I would go, but I think Jamar Chase is a lower end wide receiver 1 instead of a high end wide receiver 1 for the rest of the season. And so if I could go get somebody, if I'm sitting there with a good record and there's a great wide receiver who's on bye this week and their owner is scrambling, I might trade Jamar Chase for one of those kind of top 8 guys, one of those top 6 guys. Absolutely, I would do that.
Flacco may bring some just solid presence. Browning, it was like panic. I mean, it was oh no, we're unraveling. We're turning over the ball all the time. So I think this will be better for those guys.
Maybe I'm wrong there. Yeah, I would love to see.
I wouldn't give Chase away by any means, but
don't give him away.
No.
Absolutely not. But if you can get a top 5 wide receiver for him based on that name value, I think that I would go do that.
All right. So a couple other things from this weekend, just total shenanigans. How about Derrick Henry? He has a horrible day. The Ravens are terrible. And then he scores late. And of course I played against them. So that was frustrating. And then we're still wondering about the Denver backfield. We keep waiting for J.K. Dobbins to move aside for R.J. Harvey, but it was J.K. Dobbins, 15 fantasy points. I saw this on a side note. I saw this video of J.K. Dobbins doing an interview with ESPN Deportes, and he speaks Spanish.
Interesting.
J.K. Dobbins. Huh. It was wild. I was blown away. Very impressive. I don't know why he speaks Spanish, but I guess
we don't know what the J.K. stands for. I don't know. Like Julio Castavez or something.
I don't know what the reasoning was, but he's there's more there for Dobbins than we realize, and that's what we're seeing fantasy wise as well.
He's a renaissance man. Yeah,
and then of course this week I traded Dak Prescott, and he had a monster day, so huge day for him. Other shenanigans, CJ Stroud, monster day. So the question maybe later, bandwagon riding, are you jumping on the Stroud bandwagon against the sorry Ravens? He had 4 touchdowns, and then going into this game with Tampa Bay, there was thought, Bucky Irving's out. Is it Rashad White? Is it Sean Tucker? What kind of split? Hey, let's not move on from Rashad White just yet. He had 23 fantasy points. And then in San Francisco, most of us just wrote them off last Thursday. Let's not forget about this. And then all of a sudden, Mac Jones comes in, plays well. They get the win. And here's a lesson that I'll throw out there to listeners to consider today. Throughout your years, when you have an injured player, how has it worked for you to go get their backup versus going to get somebody else? Especially at the quarterback position or the tight end position. Normally, I would say just go get somebody else. I made a mistake in one of my leagues that I lost George Kittle. I picked up Tonjes, whatever his name is, Jake Tonjes. I still don't know his name. Mm-hmm. What are we going? Tunges, Tongies. That I gave up on him after one game. And sure enough, if I would have just kept them, I would have been in much better shape than me playing the tight end carousel the last 4 weeks.
Yeah.
3 weeks. So Anyway, that was an interesting because Tom just got into the end zone for the 49ers.
The real strategy there is how many weeks of like 3-point games are you willing to keep that guy in your starting lineup so that you have him in the starting lineup when he has the 11-point game, right?
I know.
And you just don't have the guts to do that most of the time. And so it is usually better just who do I think is the best overall player versus the handcuff to my. I will say for running back, and we've mentioned a couple of these guys here. They're just guys that aren't doing anything right now, and you just have to have them on your bench. So like RJ Harvey, I think based on we know about J.K. Dobbins' injury history, Dobbins is clearly the lead back there, but RJ Harvey has to be on somebody's bench in your league. If he's on waivers, I think if you can find any way to stash him, you have to do that. I would wager that in most people's normal scoring fantasy leagues, if you go look at the team in your league that's in first or second place, the one player that I bet is on more first place teams than maybe any other is Jonathan Taylor.
Yes.
For where he was being drafted and what he has done. And it's just like, put him down for 2 touchdowns minimum every game. He's scoring a ton at the goal line. And I think if you own Jonathan Taylor, you absolutely have to have DJ Giddens on your bench. I'm trying to get Giddens everywhere because they're comparable size-wise. Giddens is not one of these kind of scat backs that was brought in to be a complement to Taylor. He is a true handcuff, a true replacement. Yep. And if Taylor goes down, chances are if you have Taylor on your team, you're near the top of your league rankings. You need to be able to weather the storm, and Giddens is a guy that you can immediately slot into that position. So for me, it's totally position dependent. You can't do it with tight end or receiver really, but you can do it with running back.
Yeah, that's the old handcuff argument, which we've talked about before. I usually go away from it, but
running back's the only position I'm willing to do it with. Yeah, I don't even try to do it with receivers or quarterbacks or anything like that anymore. So
nope. All right. So speaking of injuries, we were all excited about Omarion Hampton. We were loving life. I'm laughing last week, having a big old time. Hampton, woo! Last couple weeks, IR out. Next 4 weeks. Now what? We'll talk about waiver wires in a little bit. And if you listened to this podcast last year, you know exactly who we're going to get on the waiver wire in LA with the Chargers. Also, other injuries to discuss a little bit. Of course, I started Darius Slayton this week out. He went down during that game too, which was frustrating. So the Giants, that was an ugly game against the Saints. Not great. Not the momentum that we were hoping with Jackson Dart and Slayton get more opportunity, Wan'Dale Robinson get more opportunity. The guy that stole the show was Theo Johnson. He's the guy you want to get. Yeah. Now, the other guy, Bellinger, he's pretty good too, but you want Theo Johnson. He's definitely a guy that's a freebie early in the show to go get on waiver wire. And you may even be a week late because they probably went in waivers last week. And then Jaylen Warren, we're wondering if he's going to come back out of the bye. What will he do this week? Kenneth Gainwell, there's some shenanigans there. And then with the Raiders, they should just be the Las Vegas Shenanigans. I mean, this is a nightmare there.
They look really bad.
Geno Smith, just dreadful. And then Brock Bowers, who you spent a top draft pick to get, and you've got the dreaded week-to-week injury. Mm-hmm. This is tough because in some ways you just want him to be out. And then you go get Michael Mayer and you get him back from a concussion. And you just start Mayer and get Bowers healthy. But it almost seems like he's just going to be limping along, or he's going to be out the next couple of weeks, and then they have a bye week 8, and then he won't be back till week 9. So Bowers, definitely some panic in Vegas. So anything else from the weekend you want to mention just from shenanigans wise?
Just, the saga, the rookie running back saga that we're experiencing this season. This may not be the best scoring wise rookie running back season that we ever have, but it will definitely be one of the most interesting. Just the stuff that's like Quinshon Judkins looks legit now. He looks like a real kind of league winner for where you took him in your draft, especially if you drafted early and you didn't know if he was going to play this season. Now it looks like he's not even going to be suspended this season. But just seeing like the Omarion Hampton thing, the question I wanted to ask you is there any New England running back, including Travion Henderson, that you feel comfortable owning going forward? It looks like it's like a 4-headed committee because I went and looked at the box score this week. I know Antonio Gibson just got hurt, but it's like Travion had 6 carries. Ramondre Stevenson's had 7 carries.
Did he have two touchdowns?
He had 2 touchdowns. So that again, that's another one where if somebody is just looking at the final score, if you can go trade Ramondre for like a middle tier running back, you got to smash accept on that. I mean, you do that as fast as you can. But now I'm wondering, now that Gibson is hurt, are they going to bring along like I think Dylan Laub, who was on the Raiders last year, who was good in stretches. You don't even remember that name.
Wait, he's now on the Patriots?
He's on the Patriots. Deneric Prince,
I thought
who was on the Kansas City
Raiders.
Chiefs. Deneric Prince was the Brashard Smith guy on the Kansas City Chiefs last year. I'm not picking up any of these guys, but I'm keeping an eye on that New England backfield because it does look like that team is going to be pretty good. And if it clears some space with Antonio Gibson, I mean, if Ramondre fumbles one more time.
How many times does he have to fumble before they move on?
They're still using him at the goal line.
They're giving him the touchdowns.
But he just keeps doing it, So yeah, the rookie running back situation is super, super interesting. It's just been a wild ride of a season from like a rookie running back situation. And I do think you're right. I mean, the Raiders have the good fortune of playing the Titans this week. So that can fix a lot of your issues, but they have looked every bit as bad as the Titans so far this season. And I think if Geno has a bad game this week, we're going to see Kenny Pickett in there.
Yeah,
like Kenny Pickett is coming. I think that's inevitable that will happen before the end of the season.
Yeah, Pickett's the kind of player that, does he deserve it? I don't know, but I'm
not saying
another
he's
shot.
Better, but he's going to get another shot.
Another shot. He's had, he's with Philadelphia. They won a Super Bowl, so maybe he's learned a thing or two watching the last year or two. Because he was with Cleveland for a moment before they got rid of him, right? That was this offseason.
He's only been
he
feels too young to be a journeyman, but he feels like he's been on like 4 teams and he's only been in the league for 3 years.
Yes, wait, that's only been a year, so I had to do the math in my head. So there you go. All right, speaking of the Patriots, let's jump to our next segment where we do a little accountability and confession.
Pardon me, Mr. Perfect. I guess I forgot that you never ever make a mistake.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like this. And totally redeem yourself!
I am the smartest man alive!
So we'll pick up right with the Patriots because I'm both right and wrong. So last week I was bragging all about Drake May and how great he's been. And he is. Mm-hmm. But fantasy-wise this week, not so much. He wasn't throwing touchdowns because Ramondre was stealing the touchdowns. And that game wasn't the shootout that I'd hoped it was going to be in Buffalo. A little bit lower scoring. And so I was also very wrong. I have to confess this. Stephon Diggs. I poo-pooed Stephon Diggs last week on the show. Way wrong. And if I'm honest, I didn't factor in the rivalry game or the former team, the revenge game. So he was very motivated, had a great game. And maybe he truly will be the number 1 receiver this year in New England. And will be pretty solid for fantasy-wise. So I whiffed on that. But I think I was right about Hunter Henry a couple weeks ago. I said pump the brakes on Hunter Henry. He'll have his moments in and out, but he's not this top. I love him. He's not this top tight end every week. So we have to be careful with him. And then I was all in on Travion, and we're still waiting to your point earlier. So I'm a little bit right and wrong with New England. And then throughout the offseason, I was trying to buy the hype train with Mason Taylor, and I had him on a couple teams early this season. And then I gave up. I was too impatient. I couldn't stick around with Mason Taylor. I needed quicker production at the tight end position. And so admittedly, I dropped him too soon. I only have him in 1 league, and he might be pretty solid moving forward. 9 receptions on 12 targets for 67 yards and 17.7 fantasy points over the last 2 weeks. So he's had a nice little run these last 2 weeks. So I'm kind of kicking myself a little bit. And then also last week on the show, I was wrong. Darren Waller had 1 big game left in him. But after that annoying dance, we're still out. We're still out. Still out. I don't like the annoying dance. Like, do it for a few more weeks before we get the full-on dance. You guys lost too. You lost. Right, yeah, so good for you.
Insult to injury there, yeah.
But Darren Waller, nice game. 5 catches, 78 yards, and a touchdown. So I was wrong there. But what confession do you need to make today?
Oh, man. I mean, I'll say Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who was a guy that I was kind of onto early during the preseason here, otherwise known as Bill. Bill Krosky-Merritt had a great game this week. And Jaden Daniels was back, and the Commanders immediately looked like a different team. I mean, Jaden Daniels is the real deal. And as soon as he came back, that offense looked dynamic, prolific. They scored a bunch of points. They won the game against a very good Chargers team. And Krosky-Merritt had a good game. you and I both thought that he got too much steam in his ADP. He was pushed up too high. And so for me, it's going to be interesting to see, does that continue with Cross Game Merit? Where does he become the true running back one? There, other guys are still getting carries. They're still getting touches. So I think I'm nervous about him. This is a game where the box score, the fantasy points looked good. I hope that they just continue to unleash him. But I think that this could have been just kind of a circumstance of Jaden being back, and maybe this continues. But he's a guy that I don't know what to think. I'll tell you, just continuing the demoralizing, just embarrassing perspective on the Arizona Cardinals. I just think I'm ready to say that Marvin Harrison Jr. is just like an above average wide receiver in the NFL, and so he'll be a low end wide receiver too for fantasy football. But I really wanted him to be like that wide receiver one alpha. And
a big step.
He doesn't seem like he has that sort of intensity about him. And there seems to be a real personality disconnect between him and Kyler Murray, So just the vibe on the sideline doesn't feel like it's what it would take to turn him into that kind of alpha receiver. So he had another fine week. You felt good if you had him in your starting lineup, but I was expecting him to make that leap and be like, I think I was really expecting him to be like a top 10, top 12 fantasy wide receiver this season. And I think he's just going to be somewhere around 20, and that makes me sad. I don't know that there's actionable advice there. I don't think that you can trade him away and get what you're looking for. Also, I'm not going out and trying to acquire him. So he's just like a solid hold. And I would still like to see him take the next step. I had more than one league where I took AJ Brown with my first pick in a draft. What do you do with AJ Brown?
I'm not ready to give up on him just yet.
Okay.
I'm not one of these that
talk me off that ledge.
Yeah, I'm not one of these guys that are panicking about the Eagles. They're the Super Bowl champs. They're 4-1, and they're loaded with talent. Now, I avoided Saquon Barkley because the numbers did not point to him having a big year. We just knew that. We knew that. There were too many carries last year and all that. So the expectation that Barkley will get back to that level of fantasy production, I'm not buying it. I don't think he will. But I think the Eagles overall are going to be fine, and I think their passing game will continue to get better. The fact they threw the ball so much, but why wasn't Brown more involved? Yeah, it's fair to question. But I think the fact that they're throwing the ball, they're trying some things, they're getting comfortable with their new coordinator, and they're going to be in some shootouts with the Cowboys again. They got another game with them. They'll be able to dominate the Giants. They'll have a shootout with the Commanders. So I'm okay with Brown. I wouldn't give him away. I'm actually considering trying to buy low. Yeah.
I think that I agree. And there's something like there's the whole like squeaky wheel theory with wide receivers.
Oh yeah.
But here's the thing about a squeaky wheel. If it's usually that gets addressed with a receiver after they've been doing it for about a week or two, but
we're in week 6.
After long enough, you just start to ignore the squeaky wheel, right? And I'm just worried that they maybe are annoyed with the way that he's behaving around this lack of volume. And so, I'm worried about my AJ Brown shares. I do think you're right; it's still a buy low target, but there's a way that could backfire on you in a major way.
Yeah, no, it's definitely concerning. You want, because you took him late first round, early second round, most likely. So you need a little more production out of him. All right, so. It's that time of the show where we jump into this week's breakout. And that's where we take a fantasy concept related to the Bible, related to life. And these topics are designed to be discussed at league meetings. So with your fantasy league. And so we provide all the content here on the show, but then also there is written content. We've got discussion questions. We've got a challenge. We've got a verse to memorize for the week. And all of that is available on fantasyfootballfellowship.com. You just have to sign up to be a free member and you get access to all of that. And so this week's breakout topic is all about decision-making. And the reality is fantasy football is all about decision-making. Because if you ask the question, how do you have a successful fantasy season? Like, what is our role in having a successful fantasy season? Make good decisions. That is our role. Now, a few weeks ago, we talked about it's all about scoring fantasy points. Yes, that's what the players have to do for us. But for us, it's making those right decisions. And the first decision we make is, of course, the best decision we can make as fantasy managers, which is to say yes to joining the league, especially when you join a fantasy football fellowship league and you say yes to meeting for league meetings every week throughout the season. But it's saying yes to say, yeah, I'm going to join the league. I'm into playing fantasy. And then from there, going back to the summer, you make decisions. I make decisions on what websites I'm going to gather information from. Who am I going to listen to? What am I going to study in preparation before the draft? And then you get to the draft. And what is the draft all about? Decisions. Who am I going to draft? Who am I going to pass on? What am I going to value? So we make those choices as well. And then all throughout the season, it is lineup decisions week after week. We are making decisions on, who to start, who to put at flex, who to leave on the bench, who to drop, who to pick up, who to trade away, who to trade for. We make decisions to accept the trade, to decline the trade. All of these decisions take place, and fantasy is all about making choices all season long. And so, Trip, as you think about that, what decision making, or where is it maybe the hardest for you to make decisions throughout the season? Where does it test you the most?
I mean, so for me, this is why we love fantasy, right? Is these complex and multifaceted decisions. You're not just making one decision every week. You're making dozens of decisions about what you're going to do with waivers, trades, guys you're going to have in your starting lineup. For me, the place that I get in my head the most about these decisions is when I have maybe, not like an elite player, but a very good player on my team who is coming up against a very good defense.
Yes.
And so I start looking at, and especially those defenses are always color coded. And so I start looking at like Garrett Wilson, who's going to be playing the Denver Broncos this week. It's like, I got to have Garrett Wilson in my starting lineup, but I'm worried about how good that Denver Broncos defense is versus how bad the Jets have been at times this season. Is there anybody that I would decide to start over Garrett Wilson that's on my bench? So that's the one that always gets me. And especially as more and more of these platforms have color coded the defenses that the players are coming up against. When I see that kind of middle tier player on my team coming up against that bright red defense, that's a decision that I struggle with more than any other.
It's absolutely, I'm right there with you. I struggle with that. What gets me oftentimes is the decision to put the guy in that is expected to have the breakout, but he hasn't had it yet. Mm-hmm. Is this the week?
Yeah.
So like this week I started Brashard Smith because I was desperate. I had some serious bye and injury issues. And so I thought maybe this was the week for Brashard Smith. He was solid. He was all right.
He had some moments in that first quarter where I thought it was going to happen. Yeah.
He had one key big play early in the game. It's like, okay, let's go with it. But that didn't continue. And so the bottom line though is every decision we make during the fantasy season matters. And one decision leads to another. So this past week, I decided to trade Jordan Mason, which then led me to make the decision to start Brashard Smith. And so there is this domino effect, of course. And so if we want to make the most of the fantasy year and the and to experience kind of the most success along the way in fantasy, we have to do our best to make informed choices and avoid the consequences of poor choices. And so as fantasy managers, I think it's good to sort of evaluate, okay, what is my decision-making process? What is helping me make these decisions? Where have I made bad decisions, and what's leading to the right decisions? And let's keep, doing more of that. And so, through 5 weeks, we can sort of look at where we stand. And if you're listening to this, a week later, maybe you're through 6 weeks, but is my team in a good position, bad position? The decisions that I now make moving forward are going to determine whether or not I make the playoffs or whether or not I'm in contention to compete for a fantasy championship. When it comes to our own lives, we know how important decision-making is. And so as we look back at our lives, what have been some of the most important decisions that we've made? And in what areas of our life are we maybe struggling to either make decisions, or maybe we're making bad decisions? And why is that? Where are we going to for advice to make decisions? And what's leading maybe to some of the bad decisions? And then, how do we continue to lean into, this is working. I'm making the right decisions, staying on the right path. And, of course, in life, just like in fantasy, there are plenty of things that are unexpected, the injuries, and there are certain things that are out of our control, but we can control how we make decisions and our process behind it. And so the most important question that you and I can make is the decision to believe in Jesus and follow him. And so it comes down to that. Just like in fantasy, we got to decide to join the league. For us, we have to make the decision whether or not we believe in Jesus, whether we decide to follow him each day. And so where do we stand with that? Because then once we decide, yes, I believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and I want to follow his way, I believe that God's word is true. Well, now all of a sudden my decisions are through that lens of desiring to follow him, please him, honor God, and follow his ways according to his word. And so have we made that decision? John 3:36 declares, whoever believes in the Son has eternal life. Whoever does not obey the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God remains on him. And so that's an important decision. That's the most important decision that we make. And that leads to the other decisions throughout the rest of our life. And so as we surrender our lives and ask each day for Jesus to lead us and guide us, are we listening? Are we aware? Are we going to God's word for wisdom to inform our decisions? And so Trip, let me have you jump in here because I'll keep going. But as you think about just sort of the decision-making process, what are some things that come to mind for you?
I mean, this is an important topic to consider because there's some spiritual or like some theological nuance here, So what the Bible seems to teach, I think this is true, is that when we make that first decision, that sort of one-time decision to put our faith in Jesus as our Savior, the forgiveness of our sins, the giver of all righteousness to us, the one who makes us right with God and raises us from death to life, that is an immediate and permanent and irrevocable decision. We're forever united to him, and nothing can snatch us out of his hand. That's a promise that he makes of us, that those who really belong to him, no one can snatch them out of his hand. And that's great news. That's why there's so much emphasis on praying the prayer, the altar call. Have you put your faith in Jesus? And that really is the most important decision that a person can make. Have I looked to Christ for the forgiveness of my sins, to give me his righteousness, to make me right with God and resurrect me to eternal life? That verse you just read from John 3, those are present tense verses. The one who believes in the Son has presently eternal life. We are brought into the infinite life of Jesus. The one who doesn't obey the Son won't see that life. They're not seeing it right now. They're experiencing God's continued wrath and separation from him. But where the nuance comes in is, even though that is an irrevocable decision, every day we make a new decision. Am I going to follow Jesus today? Right. He's inviting us into discipleship, into learning a way of life and a way of being from him. And it's difficult for us to understand, I think, that dynamic of there's nothing that I could do today that would mess me up so bad that I'm separated from Christ. Nothing that could break my union with him. But there are all sorts of decisions that I have to make about ongoing communion with him, right? You cannot be separated from your eternal identity in Jesus once you've put your faith in him. But there are all sorts of things that distract us and divide us from ongoing communion with him on a day-to-day basis, which is why he invites us to continually follow him and follow him and follow him. And for me, at least, the most important thing is, my wife, she has this workout class that she's really loving to go. She's loving going to right now. A bunch of her friends go to this class, and they have this coach that'll, if he hadn't seen you in a few days, like, he'll shame you. Like, if you've missed class for like a week or two, he'll say, hey, like, Stephanie, where have you been? I've noticed you haven't been here for the last few weeks. And I think sometimes we think of Jesus that way. Like, man, like I haven't had that quiet time with him in the last couple of weeks. I've been busy and distracted. I haven't been connecting with him. If I come back to him, he's going to greet me with a little bit of shame and a little bit of disappointment. Like, Trip, hey, where have you been? Noticed you haven't opened your Bible in a few days. Jesus he never receives us that way. He wants to train us into a way of life that follows him continually. And that involves being convicted about our sin and our inconsistency. But he never receives us with, Trip, I'm pretty disappointed that you haven't checked in a few days with me. He loves to welcome us back and say, hey, come and follow me again. Follow me anew. Recommit your life to me. And so it's a one-time decision that has daily implications for the little decisions that we make.
Yes. The little decisions daily and the big decisions that we make that are pivotal.
The critical,
The pivotal life decisions as well. And so I think part of the question today is, are we truly seeking God's wisdom and guidance for all decisions? Or each day, are we choosing, just kind of figure things out on my own? And in some ways, we make selfish decisions. So we have the choice of, okay, I'm going to seek what God's best is in this situation, or I'm just going to do what feels good, what feels right, according to my own knowledge. Or am I going to seek his wisdom and his guidance? Or is it just, I just want to go this way because I feel like it? So that's the choice that we always have. And then also, we have the choice to either honor him by the way that we live, or are we going to, not necessarily consider that I'm just going to live for my own glory and my own attention and my own pleasure and that kind of thing. So the big decisions, should I take this job? Should I move here? Are we seeking wise counsel from people that are following Jesus, but also going to God in prayer and trusting him and waiting for answers and diving into his word and fellowshipping with him, communing with him. And so is that a part of our rhythm of our life? Or are we trying to figure things out on our own? And so I think the encouragement is, fantasy football, there's a lot of information. We can, seek wisdom from other analysts and all that. And of course, fantasy is so unpredictable and all that. But in life, much more seriously, God wants to give us wisdom. And so are we willing to ask? And so James 1:5 tells us, if you need wisdom, ask our generous God and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. And so that's important. And then every day when we're, when we're on the clock in fantasy, we got to make a decision. Every day there are decisions that pop up and it's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Turn to God. Ask him to help us. Ask him to show us the path. It's Psalm 32:8. The Lord promises, I will guide you along the best pathway for your life. I will advise you and watch over you. Do we trust him? Do we turn to him? And then also, I want to share this verse as well, but Matthew 5:16, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. And so when we make good decisions, when we make the right choices, we shine a light that points people to God, that brings him glory. They go, wow, why is that guy making, why does he make good decisions? Like, what is that about? Well, I'm leaning on the Lord. I'm trying to obey his ways. I want to stay on his path, follow his plans, his purposes. And then we'll make, wise decisions as we trust in him.
I love that you framed it that way, Bryce, so every day we're confronted with thousands of little decisions. And then really, is it fair to say that maybe over the course of our whole life, we face maybe a dozen, maybe 24 of those big, vital, life redirecting decisions? And I think what we know, what we see from just different studies and surveys, that people, they come back to prayer in those big, vital moments of their life. And it really kind of in desperation, crying out to God, show me what to do here with this job situation, with this death in the family, with this difficulty in my marriage. And hey, I want everyone to hear, it's not bad. If that's the thing that brings you back to the Lord, that brings you back to prayer, and we do want to submit those big, vital life decisions to him. But I actually think that the way that we learn to hear God's wisdom and follow his guidance in those big moments is by entrusting the little decisions of our day to him every day. So for me, it's like, I come home some days and I sit in my driveway and I'm like, it's been a long day. I'm tired. I know that I'm about to walk into a chaotic household. And there's not anything big or life altering that's probably going to happen tonight between the hours of 4:30 and 7:30. But there's a lot of little moments and little decisions where my choice is I can either entrust myself to the Lord. God, help me to be patient and loving with my boys. Help me to be interested and caring with my wife, or I can just sit there and look at my phone. I can set my eyes on a screen. And I really need to, in that little decision, I need to ask the Lord for his help and cast myself on him in dependence. And I really think it's true that when we learn how to do that with the little moments in our marriage, that when those big critical moments come along, we're ready to entrust those big arguments, those big moments of conflict, those big moments of hurt and division to the Lord. And so it really is kind of if the big decision is what brings you back to God, that's great news. But if you can entrust those little decisions to him every day, you're training in being dependent on him at the most important moments of your life.
Amen. And just a reminder too, that all the decisions then lead to other decisions. And so
right, there's always that. Yeah.
The combination of decisions. And it's amazing throughout the fantasy season how, a decision to drop a player affects you. The player, the decision not to go get that guy on waivers is a decision. The decision not to move. And so, those decisions that we make in our life and some of them are, right or wrong, sinful, disobedient decisions. Like I'm either going to choose to give into this temptation or not. We'll talk more about that in the coming weeks, but those decisions are there every day. But there's also just the decisions that then lead to other decisions. And, just for instance, the daily decision that I have to run down to my basement to watch sports or talk to my wife first. Right?
Yeah.
And that's the choice. Do I want to just run and get away and not have to deal with whatever, issues maybe we have that day or conversations that need to be had? Or do I want to prioritize my wife? And so that's a choice. It's a choice that I have to, all the time go watch games and not spend time with my family, but I make the choice. Like Saturdays, I'm not able to watch as much college football as maybe as I did when I was single. I make the choice to spend time with my family on Saturdays. We go to pumpkin patches in the fall. Can't we do pumpkin patches in another time of year? But anyway, so those are the choices. So we have serious choices, but they all affect it. And so those choices that I make to invest in my family affect the relationship that I'll have with my daughters when they're 15. I'm making the choice now when they're 6 and 4 because I know that it matters later. The decision to pick up a player in week 4 is going to affect what's going to happen in week 11 as we compete. And so that translates to your job situations, your, marriage situations, other relationships, all those kinds of things. And so I hope that you'll take this topic and really have a great discussion within your league meetings and, whatever maybe decisions you're facing right now that you need prayer for, tell your league about those things and pray through those things, get some wise counsel and turn to the Lord and ask him to lead and guide you in those decisions so that he will make it clear his best path for you in the specific things. And then let's make wise choices day to day, even in the little things. So it's all about decision making. That's this week's breakout. And how is your decision making is the question today. So let's evaluate it. Let's consider it today. So there you go. That's this week's breakout. And we've got a few minutes left here today. And I hope that that's encouraging to all of you. And it is to me just to consider some of those choices that we make every day. But as we make more fantasy choices, let's talk about it. And let's begin with the choice game, which is Would You Rather? How about that?
Get in on this. Would you rather?
That sounds good. I'll have that.
It's a good time. Do you know what I mean?
This is Would You Rather.
I'm psyched.
All right, here we go. The choice is yours, Trip. Would you rather have your boy Kyler Murray at quarterback or the surging quarterback Daniel Jones?
This is a really hard one.
Isn't that an interesting one?
Yeah, really interesting one. I keep waiting for Daniel Jones to turn back into a pumpkin.
Yeah.
I mean, he has looked so good. And I kind of think that something, Shane Steichen or a better situation in Indianapolis, something has clicked for him where I really think that he's playing great quarterback. And I'm starting to believe there's no reason to expect that that's going to break down this season. I'm cautiously optimistic he's going to continue this through the season, and the Colts really may be a juggernaut this year. They may be a playoff bound and a deep run in the playoff bound sort of team. So I think I'm going to say Daniel Jones. Kyler still has, I think, a little bit more rushing upside, but he's not doing that quite as much as we wanted him to coming into the season. And I just think on any given week, Kyler can totally tank your teams. I mean, he can just make boneheaded decisions. We used to say that about Daniel Jones too, but at least through 5 weeks of the season, I think I'm more comfortable rolling with Daniel Jones as my starter than with Kyler as my starter.
The Colts just seem really legit
They
and
are locked
solid.
in.
And I love the fact that 2 weeks ago, Daniel Jones threw 2 interceptions, his first 2 of the year, and then followed that up this week with an unbelievable game. 6 straight possessions, the Colts scored a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
They are locked in, ready to go. And of course, the run game with Jonathan Taylor, like you talked about earlier, is helping things out. That helps him to be able to thrive. Next one. Next, would you rather? Would you rather have your tight end on fantasy be David Njoku or Harold Fannin Jr., both Browns tight ends with Dylan Gabriel, the new quarterback?
I'm going to say push. I want to hear your take on this. I don't think that I can answer this, and I'm not confident that anyone can. But I mean, what do you think? Who do you want here?
I have both. I started both of them this week.
I've seen guys in my leagues that have both guys on their roster.
Not on the same one. I have 2 different leagues.
I've seen guys who have both of them, and it's just like
that's
playing
dangerous.
Roulette.
Yeah. You're playing with fire on that. That to me is a bad decision. But I actually think David Njoku is the guy that I'm going to trust down the line.
Mm-hmm.
There's even talk that maybe he gets traded.
That's what I was going to ask.
That's
you think
interesting.
There's any chance that happens?
Maybe. But so Fannin got the touchdown. I don't think Njoku scored. Did he? Did he score one too? I guess they both did.
I think they both scored.
Yeah, I guess they both did. But Njoku had more targets, catches, yards. Yeah. He had the better day. So I guess it's a little recency bias, but it's also the history bias. We've seen Njoku be a top 10 tight end, top 8 tight end, and I think a young quarterback in Gabriel relying on the veteran Njoku. I feel pretty good about that.
Okay. You've convinced me. Yeah, I think that's right.
I'll lean that way. All right. How about this? So these 2 wide receivers both average 17.3 points per game. All right. I'm not even going to tell the audience yet. Would you rather have the wide receiver playing with a quarterback in his prime who's loving life with no offensive line? That's a disaster. He just lost his starting running back. Or the wide receiver who's also averaging 17.3 points, but he's now playing with a guy my age and has lost his starting quarterback at the start of the season. So this, of course, is, do you want Quentin Johnston or Jamar Chase the rest of the way? And you were sort of debating this with yourself earlier today.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, so just in a vacuum, if I have both of these guys on my roster, there's just no chance that I'm ever putting Quentin Johnston in my starting lineup instead of Jamar Chase. So in a vacuum, I'm saying Jamar. That said, this is a perfect example.
How about that scenario just laid out, though?
I mean, yeah.
Isn't that funny?
It is funny, and I think we don't know what the Flacco effect is going to be with the Bengals, and so that's tough. The Chargers offensive line all of a sudden is a disaster. And so there are some questions about their offense and their ability for longer passing plays to develop going forward, which I think affects Quentin Johnston. But going back to our earlier conversation, if I could take Jamar Chase and go trade for Quentin Johnston and Quinshon Judkins, right? Like if I could get him plus a starting running back, which it feels like
that'd be a little much. That'd be a little rich. You're being a little greedy there, Trip.
I think if Chase has another 25-point game with Flacco, you're probably scared to make that trade, giving up Jamar Chase. But I think that's a trade that is not out of the realm of possibility. If the guy who has some depth and who's higher in the rankings in your fantasy league, and you could turn Jamar Chase into 2 solid starting players, I think that's a trade you could make. You know, so that's the kind of move that I'm trying to look to make for Jamar Chase. I'm not giving him up for nothing, but if I could multiply him into 2 really good assets, I think that I'd probably do that. And I think you probably could with a guy like Johnson plus somebody else.
And now Johnston's coming off a tougher game. Ladd McConkey finally looked alive.
Yeah.
All right, here's the next one. Also interesting. So both of these wide receivers average 16.1 fantasy points per game. Would you rather have the rest of the way Courtland Sutton or Justin Jefferson?
It's a similar situation to me. Again, I think just without qualification, it's Justin Jefferson.
Give me Sutton. Give me
you want Sutton
Bo
over
Nix,
Jefferson
baby.
The rest of the way.
Yeah.
I mean, Bo Nix didn't look good until the fourth quarter of that game.
He comes
and
alive.
Then all of a sudden, he looked great.
Comes alive.
So he looks really, really good at the end of that game. And Wentz hasn't been great. There's no.
Yeah. Not great. No.
No, and JJ McCarthy, when he comes back, what's going to happen there? So there's a lot of uncertainty around Justin Jefferson, but I still think it's just one of those things where I just feel better with JJ and with Justin Jefferson in my starting lineup.
I'm highly invested in Cortland Sutton.
You're a big believer. Yeah.
Big
And I
Sutton
respect
guy.
that. Yeah.
Big Sutton guy.
The arrow's pointed up there for sure.
Not too bad. So anyway, those were some interesting stats to see guys averaging the same amount of points. So sometimes you got to dive into those numbers a little bit and go, okay, interesting. So there you go. That's Would You Rather. Some other interesting scenarios around the fantasy world. Guys looking good, guys looking bad. And so we call this bandwagon riding.
Get off the bandwagon.
It's time for bandwagon riding. Getting on, getting off. Make up your mind, all right?
All right, so here are some of the players that I am jumping on the bandwagon for. Brian Thomas Jr. in Jacksonville. I traded for him. He's gotten off to a slow start. He was just okay last night or on Monday night against, I guess it was last night, against Kansas City. But I think in the coming weeks, Jacksonville is looking like a legit team. So I'm in on Brian Thomas Jr., and I think he'll become more of what you drafted him to be. Maybe not the ceiling, but at least a little bit closer. I'm also remaining on the Justin Herbert bandwagon. He's had 3 down weeks in a row, but I think with maybe not relying quite so much on the running game, which we'll talk more about, but I think he's just going to pass. He's got weapons. I think Herbert, if they just have to solve protecting him, that's going to be the key for him. So I'm going to remain on that bandwagon. I would jump off the Jerry Jeudy bandwagon. I would jump off I'm not jumping on the Kendrick Bourne bandwagon. No. It's cute. He had 10 receptions last week, monster day. I don't want the 49ers receivers.
Yeah.
It's just who's it going to be every week? They're always injured. I just can't do that. So I'm not blowing all my fob on Kendrick Bourne. So there's a few things. What about for you, bandwagon?
The 49ers fall squarely into that category of teams that can beat you in a bunch of different ways. And so on any given week, a guy like Kendrick Bourne could go off for 100 yards, but you just don't know when it's going to happen. And other than McCaffrey, I'm not sure who on the 49ers you know that it's going to happen for in any given week. So I agree with all of your takes there that you just gave. The guy I've been thinking a lot about, CJ Stroud, and particularly the implications of CJ Stroud playing well for Nico Collins, but also for some of their other receivers that you might think about throwing in a moment of desperation. I mean, Xavier Hutchinson catches 2 touchdowns this week.
Seriously,
what's the young Higgins there? Jaden Higgins was a guy that we've been holding out for, but it seems like
Jalen Noel scored, I think.
Jalen Noel is a young receiver, and even like Christian Kirk is still on that team, So we want to see Stroud continue to improve, and he's put together 2 pretty good weeks, but he's done that against the Tennessee Titans and the Baltimore Ravens, who all of a sudden look like one of the worst defenses in the NFL, which that's hard for me to wrap. They've been terrible. They've been terrible. And they're, in their secondary, they are absolutely devastated with injuries and just guys that they've lost, guys who are underperforming. So what do you think about Stroud? I think that I'm probably not getting on the Stroud bandwagon. I think that what we saw in the first 3 games of the season is more indicative of what I think that he will be than what he's been the last 2 games.
I was off the bandwagon. I remember we talked about it on the Unpacking It podcast. I was concerned, like, oh, this is not good. Kind of last year, some question marks. And then they started off the season so poorly. But I think with Woody Marks, even though he didn't do a lot this week, the running game, Chubb was solid. So both of those guys, whether it's one or the other, talk about some shenanigans with those two. I think the running game getting better. They've got an offensive line issue too, as far as keeping him safe. I like the division where you're going to have to score points to keep up with the Colts in Jacksonville.
Right.
So you play those teams, at least once or twice the rest of the way. So I would say I'm jumping on the Stroud bandwagon.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Well, that makes me feel good. And the points thing, that's an interesting take.
So there you go.
I'll just tell you, I just want to kind of toot my own horn here for a minute. I said coming into the season, pay attention to AJ Barner. Pay attention to AJ Barner. Barner is not really a part of their offense until they get into the red zone, the Seahawks.
4 weeks in a row?
But yeah, once they're in the red zone, he is arguably their primary target, but definitely like one of the top 2 guys that it seems like Darnold is looking for when they're inside like the 10-yard line, especially. So he's a guy that you could do worse as bye weeks continue to come up. If you're just desperate at tight end and you just need to plug somebody in, that's a bye week bandwagon that I'm getting on, just hoping for a TD, which I think is what you're doing a lot of time with like sort of second and third tier tight ends. So I'm on the AJ Barner bandwagon as these bye weeks come, and my starting tight end is missing.
All right, there you go. So there's a little bandwagon riding. We will wrap up the show. We'll talk some waiver wire, and we will ask the question.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
We like to play a little game. Who is that? We look across the league, and there are always these random people that show up on the fantasy radar every week, and we have to figure out, are they for real? What are they all about? And sometimes it's just fun to look at some of these random names too, that we just weren't counting on. So let's go to Dallas first. And this guy scored he had 6 receptions on 9 targets, 114 receiving yards, 18.4 fantasy points, and basically career highs in every category. His name, Ryan Flournoy.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
I mean, can we just pause here and say Dak Prescott is playing out of his mind. And so Dak is making these guys look legit. And with CeeDee Lamb out, you could do worse than the Cowboys' second receiver, even if it's a guy you've never heard of before.
I had never heard of him, not even close. So I knew about Jalen Tolbert, and Turpin was out. So good for Flournoy. I probably won't pick him up on waivers, but good for him to have
0 points next week.
A big day. Yeah. All right. So how about this guy? His name is Albert Okiwogabom Jr. 5 receptions, 36 yards, and he was the tight end for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
No, it wasn't Brock Bowers. No, it wasn't Michael Mayer. I don't know where Ian Thomas was. I think he's on that team too. No, it was Albert Hakawagabuma Jr.
I was just excited to hear you try to pronounce that.
Gosh, I'm sorry. I wish I knew.
I'm glad it was you and not me. Yeah. I'm not even going to try it.
All right. So some other guys that popped up this week, either scoring touchdowns, getting into the action. How about Gunnar Helm?
Come on, seriously, who is that?
In the Panthers game, Mitchell Evans once again gets in the end zone.
Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
You mentioned Xavier Hutchinson. I've already played it.
Come on, seriously, who is that?
Yeah, he's been around Houston a little bit, but he got involved very much so. I think he had 2 touchdowns, didn't he? And then even in Cincinnati, you had our boy. He's made an appearance on this
list often.
Andre Yeshivas.
Come on, seriously, who is that?
And then how about even the Cardinals? We talked about Michael Carter and Amari DiMarcado. What about Bam Knight making an appearance?
Come on, seriously, who is that?
My favorite fact about Bam Knight is that he changed his name. His name was Zondervan Knight.
That's what it was,
and he legally changed it to Bam. I'm pretty sure he went with Bam. He's an NC State running back, so I knew about him when he was in college. But yeah, he's probably a guy to keep an eye on now that we don't know if DeMarcado's in the doghouse. So
yeah, that's a good point. Absolutely,
it's fun to say Bam. Just shout Bam like Bam Bam from Flintstones when he scores a touchdown.
My wife and I are going as the Flintstones for actually we're going as the neighbors. Our neighbors are the Flintstones, and we're Barney
Rubbles. Barney and Betty Rubble.
Barney and Betty.
Yeah.
So I've got a Barney costume.
I like that.
Yeah. So that's my
sounds a little scandalous, man. We get to see some photos.
Those will probably be private. Those are I don't know about those. I don't know if the fantasy world needs to see that. All right, let's so those are some random players. I'm not sure I'm picking up any of those guys. I will say if Kendre Miller happens to be available in your waiver wire, definitely pick him up. He would be a priority. He's getting more and more involved in New Orleans, is getting close to even being a flex play with Alvin Kamara, but moving forward could be more Kendre Miller. Also, don't overlook Tyjae Spears. If you've got him, don't drop him. I would hang on to him a little bit longer, let him get healthy. And if a team, another team in your league gets impatient and drops him, go get him. And then let's wrap up with this. Our boy is back. Kamani Vidal.
Come on, seriously, who is that?
So last year I hyped him up before the season, and then he finally got his opportunity with the Chargers and he scored a touchdown. I went nuts. I lost my voice. I was so excited about Kamani Vidal, and then he disappeared. He was, I don't know, Jim Harbaugh did not want to play him, and he came back. They brought him back, though. So last year was his rookie season. Now, Omarion Hampton is out. Everybody's going to be talking about picking up Haskins. I say get Kamani Vidal. He came into the game in the fourth quarter. He was stopped at the goal line, but had at least one or two nice runs. And I've bought into his ability ever since he was at Troy, and I watched him play against my App State Mountaineers. And so I will stay on the bandwagon, and I will go pick up Kamani Vidal this week. What about you?
I mean, yeah, I'm not sure that I have much to add to that list. There's not a lot on the waiver wire that excites me this week. I do think, you need to make a bid on one of those Chargers backup running backs. I sort of wonder if, with how decimated their offensive line is, if it's just going to matter that Haskins weighs 230 pounds and Vidal weighs 205 pounds, you know, so maybe just the big body they just need somebody to bruise it up the middle for three yards. And then I'll just say, we just mentioned him, but I just think, the Cardinals backfield is a mess. And so maybe if you have a really good record, you go try to trade for Trey Benson. But if not, Zonovan Knight, I just think Bam Knight needs to be on like somebody's bench. You know, again, it's just a bench pickup. He looks like he's going to be the goal line back. If we see this week that DeMarcado truly is in the doghouse, which I think is a real possibility, especially, you know, Michael Carter sprains his ankle or something, and all of a sudden you've got a guy that you can start for the next 3 or 4 weeks. So that's the kind of stuff that we're dealing with this week on the waiver wire. There's not a lot that's super exciting there. Unless
Mason Taylor, Theo Johnson, AJ Barner, all those guys are worth
some
picking
tight ends
up
that are worth thinking about. Yeah.
If Luther Burden or Kyle Managai were on waivers based on the Bears being on a bye week, you definitely want those guys as well. I've got Michael Penix on a roster. He might have been dropped during a bye week. Not a horrible backup quarterback that you may need down the line. So there you go. That's this week's show. Trip, great to have you back. Enjoyed talking decision making today. I hope that was encouraging to those of you that heard the breakout. And man, week 6, here we go.
Here we go.
So enjoy. For Trip, I'm Bryce. I'm a fantasy manager who follows Jesus. I believe in the good news that he died on the cross for my sin. He was resurrected, and through faith, I've been saved by his grace. I hope that is true for you as well, and I hope you'll join me as we live life as fantasy managers who follow Jesus together. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you next time right here on the Fantasy Football Fellowship Podcast.